Good afternoon. Um, well, actually, it's still noon, but um, it's my third recording in that series, and this one is devoted to education in Russia. It's let me say some words, a few words before I start. Um, so overall, my situation is such that I have been a victim of a crime, and this is a top echelon criminality at the level of the United Nations right now, I guess. Of course, this is devoted, this is not devoted, this is someone is trying to create the impression that I cannot speak English. I happen to be the graduate of the English philology at the Jagiellonian University. So excuse me, but you have something wrong and let me prove it. So this is my index book. Here it is. This is me. And here are the numbers. And this is the completion. So I'm the graduate of the English philology at the Jagiellonian University with the MA thesis Life is a War as a metaphor defining the world of Otello, written under the supervision of Marta Gibinska, getting the top mark at the time, which is very good. And that obviously means my English is perhaps not excellent if we think of the Shakespearean standards, but it's certainly very good and competent, even if a lot of damage has been done to my memory, parts of my lexicon moved elsewhere, etc. Anyway, I am Agnieszka Beata Magdalena Rojek, and as I've said, I'm a victim of atrocious criminality here in Poland. This is probably related to the new philosophical developments for, I believe, the whole LGBT movement, the whole LGBT ideology can be considered a philosophical movement, and it goes against the traditional view of the human being, which is why I'm saying it is philosophical. So this is the overall context of the crime. There are probably also other reasons. There are political reasons. There are many reasons concerning the number of parties involved, the number of the crowds that have been inspired to take part in the criminality. And in the overall context, some time ago, I started traveling towards Russia. And this is not the Russia of. This is not a modern Russia. This is not the opposition. This is the establishment as it is. This is where I have been traveling since Easter, I guess, but I did not realize it at the time yet. I started traveling that direction because I got the information that they wanted to lock me in a psychiatric ward forever. So, and that is truly ridiculous. I am a totally sane person, even if traumatized. And there is a level of criminality where all further dialogue and consideration of political powers or organs of the state stops being the question at all. So, I mean, you just continue living as if whatever you can, and basically you're trying to find some solution, but it may not arrive, and it has been the case here. I hoped I could somehow um, get some protection from Russia due to my actual life as a teacher, as an English teacher, which definitely meets the standards of the left wing, and I'm a winner with that experience, professional experience. There's no doubt about it. Of course, I can take it to the right wing too because I was an excellent teacher, but basically, I hoped Russia could help, and the help, of course, includes the care for my parents, my mother and my father, who have been targeted by the criminals here in Poland too. And from Poland it goes into further areas of criminality. Sadly, it has not happened, I believe, at least from the information I get. So I'm at the stop right now, with no idea what to do next. But still, on the 9th of July 2021, I started writing something in response to the information about education I read on the official site of Vladimir Putin after his consultation with his ministers. It's not complete. It says there to be continued, and there are some points which are valid for the president, I guess, and less valid for me as a teacher with my interests and my areas of focus. What I have written is a part of the Forest Society, and this is what I created, already inspired by Russia, already traveling in that direction. I'm not sure how I'm going to create it. I started with creating it, and then the first thing that I actually did was creating the, so to say, a kind of wall concept. But this is only a metaphor. A few concepts, a set of concepts that block Scientology. However, there's one area where I could not do anything, and this is the area of assists. So I could not find any replacement. I was a Scientologist. Some say that actually I was a Sea Org member. Some say that once you are a Sea Org member, you are always a Sea Org member. But I don't know if it can count, because there are serious considerations concerning the very promise and the very purpose of the existence of the whole organization. This, as I'm saying, this is very complex. I have serious considerations concerning a possible anti-human slant through the introduction of a new race. But this is not about Scientology. This is basically me, Agnieszka Bata Magdalena Rojek, as the individual, a victim of criminality worldwide. Perhaps not all parts of the world, but the superpowers of the world targeting the private individual, the law-abiding citizen, the innocent person, and a private person. Have I already mentioned that? What else I can say? And incidentally, a virgin. So I believe my identity data has been moved elsewhere. So the situation is really top criminal. But on the 9th of July 2022, I was still full of goodwill, regardless of what had been happening, because I know that there's an impression created. All that has been done is actually Russia, and I know it's not Russia. I mean, perhaps it's Russia too right now, but these are Ukrainians. And as I said, it starts in Poland at the level of the authorities, and these are not only the current authorities, also the previous ones, and perhaps it also goes back to the primary school even. I attended the school, I completed the school, the primary school named after Marshal Ivan Konev, which is why I hoped for some protection with Russia. I was one of the top pupils of the school. So I hoped for that, but it has gone wrong with the intervention from all sorts of parts. Okay, it's been already 10 minutes. So to the point. Education in Russia. I have quite many pages, and it's not complete, but let me present what I have. I read it because this is how I have prepared it. So it's been some time since my interest has gone in the direction of Russia. Too much sorrow, for that means, sadly, a high rise of cruelty and hatred on the part of the already hostile Poland, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The latter perhaps a bit less vicious, though calculated. Speaking of which, it also means a rise in anxiety on the part of the People's Republic of China and, in response, Japan. It has proved even more danger to me and my closest family, of which I won't speak now, even if that concerns me most. To the point, I can see Russia is supplying information about the main lines in education. Blocked as I am also by the anti-Putin Russia, I have decided to share some of my ideas from the hypothetical position of a Pole, an English teacher with an experience of the overall responsibility for a class of 12-year-olds, providing consultation for Russia, bearing in mind a possibility of it being a new homeland one day. Speaking of the identity and the position, I must admit I am not a communist. So it is a foreigner in the current Russia. Whether we think of the establishment or of the new technological wave developed worldwide from the cult of Julian Assange. This position gives me areas of uncertainty, which I shall pinpoint. Actually, when I read on, you see that I did not pinpoint it in an outstanding way, but you can read it between the lines. I believe my thinking of education has grown out of my family background. My own education up to the higher education, my experience as a teacher, and my non-professional life as we live it day by day. My family background is most valid, because the person I have in mind as I enter the classroom is my mother, the daughter of my grandmother, who was a victim of the Second World War. Her mother died as she was 16 in imprisonment, certainly not for political activity or whatsoever criminality. She ended up poor, hopeless, and helpless, She could not afford education, but she found strength to bring up two daughters. The older one is my mother. Born poor, living poor, completing her secondary school education regardless of the difficult family situation and health problems. It's hard to read when there is pain in the eye or when one does not see too clearly. And getting employed soon after in the court of law as the person taking the minutes or writing the faithful report of what is being said during the court hearing. Meeting my father at work and finally giving birth to me. Born relatively rich. Naturally, we start as we enter the school education. And we need to start successfully. It does not mean that children are to have a sense of success because the teachers are lenient and school is fun. It means we need to prepare them for further education, making sure they can catch up with what other children have, because their parents are educated, not to mention professors. This is the most important period, for even if we were to agree that people develop in different ways due to their natural talents or taking different social roles, we must agree we want to have a level as a society. It means we need to make our specialists in education work on means and ways. The situation. I have a class of 30 children and 3 years, let us say, for making them ready and confident for further education. 5 of them are brilliant, totally brilliant. School time will be a fairy tale. 20 are of very potential, and I use inverted commas for a purpose. And 5 appear to be the teacher's nightmare. Let us start here. Let us start with the nightmares. Our 5 pupils need to get extra attention and an individual approach from the very start. Perhaps it is uncomfortable emotionally to be pinpointed and listed as different, special care, or whatsoever label may come, not a psychiatric one. But this is about the future of the children, their families, their local community, and the nation. And probably they need a lot of extra work. Preferably paid, for idealism can be considered suspicious. A lot of extra work on the part of the teachers. But they have to get what other children have been growing up with since birth. It starts with company, and that is not an artificial culture, but an alive, real life culture, likable. We meet at school, spend that time together, we play together, we talk, and we learn. It may prove that they do have something to offer. For instance, a boy who confuses his letters of the alphabet can know 20 different sounds of birds singing. Or it may prove that they can offer nothing but gratefulness at this point, or even less. No matter what we get, criminality excluded, we take that step because it is our future. It might need more contact with parents who know education pays for the elites, and there's no time for socializing as there is work on the farm or elsewhere. We are choosing our future. We are choosing our ability to stand up to the rest of the world when I am standing in front of my farm and sharing the competence that the guy in the top fashion jacket wearing an apparent familiarity does not have. I can. We want the confident I can. Of course, the competent I can. And we want the I can at the beginning of the school education. So, there are 4 points. 1. Parents value the children's education. 2. Teachers value the children's education. 3. Children value their education. 4. The authorities value the children's education. So these 4 points must be present as a natural state of the art, so to say. And without that, not much can be done. These are, in other words, prerequisites. Now, problems. We are talking about the nightmares, or real nightmares in time, if it's not properly solved at school when they start. Problems. 1. The children don't understand the school language. 2. The children don't have the adequate language. 3. The children do not know the learning process. Right, so perhaps the first A you wrote was beautiful, but perhaps it was not. Like the cat you drew as a little boy, and you never understood that the first cat did not need to be the ideal you had in mind. So try to draw it again, and finally you will arrive at the very ideal you have in mind. In other words, if there's a boy and he starts writing his letters for the first time in his life, and there's a girl and she has this beautiful copybook, and he looks at her letters and there's a gap. It's an abyss, and the abyss will become clear as I continue. If the children do not know the school language, the teacher can explain so we go back to point 1, and then I pick up on the point 3 again. If the children do not know the school language, the teacher can explain 100 times slower and slower, and it is hard to blame the pupil for not understanding. or label him or her as incapable, not to mention unable. He or she does not know the school language. The teacher needs to find out what in particular the pupil does not know and let him or her know. It can happen that a pupil needs actual physical movements to understand the prepositions before and after. Stand in front of the chair. Stand in front of the chair. Stand behind the chair. Do you understand in front of and behind now? Do more exercises. And so on and so forth. It is not about looking for humilities, family items. Something wrong. Oh yes, it is about learning in front of and behind, to be able to use before and after while telling the time in a foreign language, let's say English. Specialists in education need to do the job of diagnosing the starting competence problems and finding means and ways. Normally, chairs are easily available. It does not take huge investments. So this is the switch in your thinking that you must have. So this is not unable to start with. This is not incapable. This is the missing knowledge, actual knowledge and competence that other children have due to their family background. And it can be remedied before, and it must be remedied before you label the pupil. So the diagnosis is about what does he or she does not have that other children have because they have been given it as part of their growing up process. This is 7 years. If the children do not have the adequate language, they cannot communicate. So, what is a triangle? God Almighty. Can I draw it? No, you can't. Define. Silence. Fail. But I know what a triangle is. Fail. So, what are you checking really? And what is the child's problem? Well, triangles are an exact science. Our children can need the level of before and after to catch up with the school as the first formal society language. So get your specialists in educating to work on diagnosing, finding means and ways. Certainly, pupils will know their befores and afters by the time of their maturity or as adults. The point is, they need them now. Not to lag behind with the schoolwork and to be able to move up grade after grade with the rest. If the children do not know the learning process, They may think they were running fast as soon as they had made it to stand up and put the leg forward. If that does not happen, they may arrive at the conclusion that there is some higher species that can run fast, and the rest are to be satisfied with being able to stand rather than lie, or just lie and move your head around to see the world. I hope you understand the metaphor. Even if I do not run fast, actually, I hate running, but I love walking. And I am quite good at volleyball and table tennis, though I must say my competence has been incapacitated to a large extent, most of it left only in my brain and body cells memory. These are conditions sine qua non for our little nightmares, and they need to be met so that they would not become nightmares. It makes them move from the 5 to the 20, making it 5 of the brilliant and the 25 on their way. There are other elements of what we may call the school life that need to be taken care of at this early stage, and of which we shall be taking care of throughout the period of education. We bear in mind we are working towards the future power of the nation. Out of our 30, some or many may have non-optimum learning conditions at home, for all sorts of reasons. Which is why each school is to provide space and friendly care after the obligatory learning time, Incidentally, the same would be a requirement for the religious centers, whatever the faith. It is about creating a sense of inner safety. With that goes inner peace, while focusing attention on other activities, be it learning, reading, doing homework, or socializing. The place where one can always come and feel welcome, even if one were to sit there undisturbed before one gets the comfort of using the space for organized activities. For instance, getting peer tuition from classmates. If we go back to our pupil who finds it difficult to write his or her letters within the limit of provided lines, we want him or her to know he has arrived into the place where he can learn. So we want him or her to know he has arrived, feels welcome, and basically we can talk. But children use this time to be better pupils, so he or she can find his or her spot, sit there, and start working on his letters in the friendly atmosphere as his or her own responsibility, in awareness of the school duty. Let us say he or she devotes 10 minutes to each of the letters he or she has just learned, taking a break after each 10 minutes devoted to one letter for a week, or whatever other organization he or she chooses. The idea is he or she is comfortable, he or she has the conditions to learn, he or she has the sense of duty. The letters get better after the first semester, and he or she is confident writing his or her letters. Perhaps it is not about letters. Perhaps it is about recognizing species or plants or whatever it is. The key elements are 1. Space. 2. Friendliness. 3. The self-imposed sense of duty, which is basically he understands it is my duty, or she understands it is my duty. It would be a good idea to make sure there are healthy food and drinks, for example, warm milk, available for free. There should be no discrimination against wealthy people in such places. Though the parents can sponsor purchase of the food and drinks, but without making any claims on the school activity on the basis of the sponsorship. The state money ought to be enough. Such places should be relatively free of digitalization, and the distinction should be made clear. For computer activities, another space should be provided. It is to be able to make a choice between humanity and whatsoever digital superpowers, and resort to each when one does choose so. Now the learning culture. Other problems need to be addressed at the start too, and they have to do with the learning culture. In Poland, we have been fed with a poison of insanity as part of our obligatory reading. I mean Gombrowicz and his Ferdydurka. Whatsoever real-life problems had been encountered at school, and certainly there could be a problem with teachers superimposing profiles on pupils at an early stage of their school life, which is incorrect because it goes against the intention of using each individual's natural potential at its best in future. It is so whatsoever real life problems had been encountered at school, it is totally unacceptable to let the idea of some inherent hostility and constant fight between teachers and pupils enter the pupils' and teachers' minds. Teachers and pupils are on the same side, and they are at school to prepare for life, full of dangers and challenges outside. the enemy is not supposed to be present within. And this is the most important thing we need to understand about education. And we must act by the rule. The university professor blocking a brilliant student because he or she might be his or her competition one day is out of place, and factually committing the act of high treason by depriving the nation of its real potential. The same concerns deadly or incapacitating competition between students. How are they to prepare for the real life, the extreme, sometimes conditions of life in the current world? I do not know. Get your specialist in education to work on diagnosing, finding means and ways, etc. But do not kill your own potential unless the potential kills other potentials, not necessarily the high intellect. Perhaps it's about sensibility, perhaps about morality, righteousness, perhaps about an artistic or other genius, perhaps about humanity, where men are men, women are women, boys are boys and girls are girls, fathers are fathers and mothers are mothers. Not all values are measurable, as long as we are human beings. And this is an important decision to make before all life becomes a virtual reality. There's nothing wrong with the dignitary's child participating in the school activities while his mother is a headmistress. But there is a lot wrong in the school and national culture if the dignitary's child can beat and abuse non-dignitary girls and boys, because if he or she does not, they get better results than he or she, or look more beautiful, or are more liked, or whatever else. I often ask myself this question here in Poland. If I had been made aware of the value of the overall excellence and had worked for the result in the secondary school becoming an indisputable top and the paragon of excellence, would I have been killed in a car or other accident? Does it sound real? Do we want the lower level dignitary average top achievement or excellence? If you want excellence, we need to make our schools capable of freeing it rather than go for the national underperformance. Rather than go for the nationwide underperformance, but actually the national underperformance. We want the culture of our 30 out of 30. With the inherent idea of minimum waste, not the outstanding potential waste to create one icon that looks great but has no content. Excuse me, no essence. The 30 are our essences, each different, each unique, each irreplaceable. If we want to be rich and live in abundance and have multi-talents. The overall sense of mutual support between teachers and pupils translates into the practical use of the space and time provided by schools. The rich boy does not want to be considered an outsider, the not with us, because he spends his afternoons at school learning or teaching others, rather than gets himself dragged. We must have an offer, for instance, exceptional books on the school shelves. One of the key organizational principles is evaluation. In Poland, there are two areas: the learning process and the conduct. It is vital to introduce all parties into the essence of assessment. The notes at each stage are pieces of information about the pupil's level of knowledge and competence in relation to the standardized or individualized, which is the case for some pupils, requirements for the level of education specified in appropriate school documents, which have a legal value. It means that the pupil asked to answer questions, checking his or her knowledge and competence on the 1st of October, after the first month of learning, provided the school year starts on the 1st of September, has learned that much, and nothing but that. Ideally, the pupils ought to be informed how he or she can do better or actually get the top mark. But the most important organizational principle is that the pupil, his or her parents, the teacher, and the school headmaster or headmistress understand this is not a definition of the pupil, but the assessment of his or her knowledge and competence on the specific date in relation to the specific requirements of which he or she should have been informed. For instance, today we are going to the forest and we shall be learning the shapes of the leaves. We shall learn 10 for a start. And we are to be able to know the names of the trees, and we are to be able, so we must be able to know the names of the trees or forest plants they belong to. So what is the exact requirement? To know 10 or to know at least 10 out of 20, let us say. It may be that the 10 is compulsory. So when the pupil knows only 9, it is still fail. And that would be the alphabet. So the alphabet must be complete. And if you know the whole alphabet, it's a pass. If you don't, it's a fail. So this is the kind of situation. Or it may be that we have been learning about the 10. But if he or she knows 5, it is fair. And that would be the knowledge of all the words, starting with the letter A, if we were to take it to the extreme. So, if you think of how many words there could be starting with the letter A that you may know, The point is, the alphabet is necessary, and the knowledge must be complete. The range of vocabulary can grow, and knowing more or less of it gives us a certain level of knowledge and competence. Incidentally, I wonder if anyone has ever thought of creating lexicons for different levels of school education. The actual words, all of them, listed as a range of vocabulary typical of the educational level at school. Furthermore, information about the actual qualification of the assessment in Poland, Furthermore, information about the actual qualification of the assessment. In Poland, we have the 6-note scale, which is excellent, very good, good, fair, pass, fail. When I attended the primary school, we had very good, 5, good, 4, fair, 3, and fail, 2. The pass was added as the difference between someone knowing something rather than knowing nothing, but not enough to get the fair. And the excellent was added to mark the difference between someone having full knowledge required, which is very good, and someone with a surplus, resulting from his or her own interest in the subject, which is excellent. In time, especially in test examinations, it has developed into a confusion, where excellent is treated as a band of the top up to the 100% of the required knowledge and competence, which makes it very good in fact, not excellent. So 100%, when we think of the change and the purpose, the intent, 100% is actually very good. It's not excellent. Tests allow for no excellent achievements unless there are special tasks at the level higher than the level required at the level tested. These need to be clarified and explained to all parties. As a matter of fact, the definitions ought to be a legal document for the sector of education. Each final evaluation should be open to questioning and correction or improvement. 2 situations. 1. The pupil disagrees with the assessment. 2. The pupil was not able to learn to his or her potential and intention at the time for whatsoever reason, health problems, distress, etc. Perhaps the reasons acceptable could be listed if we do not want to give too much freedom. I could not learn my English in time because the TV program was too attractive. It's boring during the summer holiday time, so I will turn my good mark into a proper excellent. The first situation. The pupil knows all those 10 leaves very well, But when he or she comes to school, he or she can never recall the names. Something strange happens. Suddenly, he or she cannot even see the proper shapes, and all gets weird. The pupil ought to have a chance for a friendly exam, checking if he or she knows the 10 leaves, with stress factors reduced, and aiming at establishing only that. Does the pupil know the 10 leaves? The second situation. Let us say the requirement was 100 leaves. 100 plants, and the pupil had not visited all the places because he or she had been taking care of his or her mom. So he or she got the level of 70 leaves known, but wants to get the 100. He or she ought to be given an exam where he or she can show he or she knows the 100. And there ought to be no circumstances other than the establishment of his knowing the 100 now or not involved. If we assume that the power of individuals makes the overall power of the nation, we will understand that each individual progress counts. And we should not afford losing any. Taking another vantage point, we should pay attention to undeserved promotions, as they generate demoralization leading to criminality, apart from creating other problems, one of them being a pupil not able to learn, not the other way around. It is not a good teacher who passes a pupil not knowing his or her alphabet and promotes him or her to the level where he or she is supposed to read fluently. The pupil has to learn the alphabet. Has to. This is a formal requirement, obligation. The pupil has to learn the alphabet to be able to travel relatively easily throughout all the grades left. Each subject has its alphabet, and the specialists in education must define these as the minimum requirements at each level. Then teachers need to stick to them as a legal matter. The school headmaster or headmistress is responsible for providing needs-oriented remedial programs with the use of the school space I had described. Space, friendliness, duty. All pupils have to, as a formal legal point, know their appropriate alphabets for each level of education. When pupils are promoted illegally, criminality starts. It must be uniform. Otherwise, the law-abiding teacher can get eliminated and become a target of the unintelligent pupil's terrorism years after the event of acting in agreement with the law stating all pupils are to meet the required level of basic competence and knowledge rather than be rewarded for the excellence and top morality in addressing the educational needs of all, including the ones that had been left behind by others. What does it mean specifically? For maths, we travel from apples counted to digits. Back to the early stage, to the start. We learn about digits, symbols, shapes, rules. We learn to work in the non-physical realm. And we take the ability with us wherever we go. Specialists in maths can add to my list, of course, perhaps colors, sounds, movements. For our mother tongue, we master our alphabet, learn correct words, spelling, pronunciation, and meaning, in their correct use, context and grammatical rules, symbols that provide meaningful order for the words, punctuation marks. And once we have this correct at the level we have achieved, 10 leaves for the alphabet, at least 10 leaves for our words, 10 leaves for the symbols. So complete. Relative to the basis, relative to the overall accessible material or knowledge, and then again complete. We learn forms and to give an example, simple storytelling is the basis of a lot. The 7-year-old can have his story of Russia. What makes it? His or her story of Russia. What makes it? His or her family story? How about his own story? His or her own story? Stories live because they are fed by people living lives. At an early age, excuse me, the telephone is ringing. At an early age, pupils can learn a lot if we show them different aspects of the story, generic or a story, any story. Is it true or false? Is it complete or selective? If it is selective, what is missing? And what changes does the omission effect? Put simpler for the grade. What's the biblical story? Are there any other? We learn a lot thinking of stories, and there's no great literature without them. Even a poem has an untold, unless revealed in the poem, story behind it. Which is why we start with the story and relate it to life. So as I have put it down, the story is in capital letters and life is in capital letters. Which is why we start with the story and relate it to life. To give an idea of how it can work as we move up towards higher education, we can ask questions. What's the ancient times story of Russia? What's the Middle Ages story of Russia? Or the medieval story of Russia? What's the Renaissance story of Russia? And so on. Of course, I am not able to take the floor and start teaching that, but I am able to make you think and get the best of your expertise out in a new way. One needs a lot of it to answer the questions above. The thinking takes us from very good at best to excellent, no doubt. If we are given that in our universities, if we are given that in our university studies, we can. If we are not, we can't. But can arrive there one day, provided we ask. Back to our primary school start. What's my parents' story of Russia? What's my grandparents' story of Russia? What's my great-grandparents' story of Russia? In the primary school, one ought to have some idea of what life is about for people, apart from the proper state-determined lessons delivered as teaching at school. So both, because there might be a reason for a certain state agenda. And also, as we get more educated and more aware, we start looking, and we might notice that, in Poland, a few years ago, they started talking about the so-called Rzeź Wołyńska. I'm not sure if it's Wołyń. Anyway, the massacre. And, it was committed by the Ukrainians. And, now Poland is a great friend of Ukraine and the great enemy of Russia. So what we got was another Polish trauma, but committed by the Soviet Union. And not talking about the crimes committed by Ukrainians anymore. But basically, one also, as one sees the world developing, there's also this stabilizing outline of the history provided by the state, which perhaps has some significance for the positioning against some rising powers we might be not aware of, while the politicians are aware of. So basically, in Poland, we had the Soviet Union, and the education I got was, this is really bad. And I'm not saying it's not bad. I'm just saying that now we have the United States. In the end, one asks oneself, is there any political power that is actually good at all? So it all becomes relative, and it's important um, to have this thinking from an early stage, even as a little child. Okay, so this is my story, and is it important, for instance, that as I was traveling, as I was walking in the market square, I met this Hare Krishna guy, and he gave me the little book about Hinduism. And I did not read it at the time. But imagine I read it and I traveled in a totally different direction in my whole life. But what does it mean? How does it relate to the fact that I'm a Christian, that I was born in Poland? Poland is a Christian country. Finally, you arrive at the question of God. So how about this God in India? Is it God or is it not? So we talk about the creation of the world. And it becomes important because who, after all, is this guy in India? I mean, is he a non-believer? Is he an infidel? So think of the guy who represents technology only. There's no spirit. And it starts with the story. So in the primary school, one ought to have some idea of what life is about for people. Apart from the proper state-determined lessons delivered as teaching at school. Question: who guarantees the freedom to talk? My mother's story is the story of Poland. My dad's story is the story of Poland. My story is the story of Poland. And this is real Poland. These happen to cross out what we are given in political speeches, church sermons, and handbooks. Conclusive. We do not want the Free Poland precedent of the naive who thought she could enjoy the freedom of speech and ended up traveling to Putin's Russia in her dreams. To be continued or not. Religion, morality, ethics are but a few of key issues that need to be negotiated between humanity and the political agenda. Can we honestly teach honesty as a value? Can we not if we want morality? Can we not want morality if we want humanity? Can we not want humanity? Perhaps some can. Essentially, we end up with, how human are you? If we reject it, the humankind loses the raison d'être. Agnieszka Bata Magdalena Rojek, the 11th of July 2022. And I'm not sure if I continue. Oh, by the way, this is Krakow. This is Twardowskiego Street. Actually, 57 Twardowskiego Street, flat number 4. Because I know that probably Samsung got involved in the crime, which is why they give a false location to the recording. And other things are happening as well. So that would be for a start. Of course, a lot of development can follow, but I'm not the Minister of Education. This has been a consultation, a goodwill consultation, and due to the rise in criminality and the devastation of life, I'm not sure what's going to come next. There's always a problem with the authorship, because from my perspective it's not clear who has done what. So there's a problem with holding someone responsible, but obviously one knows that people are involved, and granting someone the freedom to attack people like me and my parents is totally unacceptable.